What happens if you take Kerbal Space Program, mix it with Lego, throw in some game mechanics from a couple of indie games, and shake it all up? Well, you get pizza! Pizza? Okay, let me explain. Hello everybody, and welcome! Almost a year ago, we found out that Take-Two planned to shut down development studio Intercept Games and thus put an end to the development of Kerbal Space Program 2. And in June, it was official. All employees working at that developer were fired and KSP2 was dead. But it was not the only abandoned title. In parallel to the sequel to our beloved original space simulation, another game was in the works at Intercept Games. A collaboration between Kerbal Space Program and Lego. And today, I'm going to tell you all about it. Everything you're going to see and hear in this video is based on conversations I had with multiple people familiar with that project. I'm going to tell you the history of the game, what it was supposed to achieve, and I can also tell you a bit about the gameplay. If this type of look behind the scenes is to your liking, please consider subscribing to this channel. I focus on space simulation games like Kerbal Space Program and the currently in development Kitten Space Agency, but you can also find space history and science videos on my channel. We recently cracked the 100,000 subscriber milestone and really want to keep the positive momentum going. And if you haven't already watched my almost hour-long KSP2 development history, I highly recommend it for additional context to get the full picture of this function surrounding everything Kerbal under the control of Take-Two. Link is up top and in the description. And with that, let's dive straight in and start with, what was this game supposed to be? First off, I owe you an explanation. Why did I mention pizza in the beginning? Well, that was the codename for this game. It never got an official title before Intercept Games was shut down, so it was just called Pizza, right until the end. In essence, you played a Kerbal that was somehow in the Lego universe. So far, I don't know that your character had a name yet. It definitely wasn't any of the big four from Kerbal Space Program, meaning Jeb, Bill, Bob, and Valentina. And you were not on Kerbin, the usual point of origin for the KSP games. Instead, there were some exotic planets and moons. To get around, you had to solve some challenges, usually by building a new vehicle like a rover or rocket. The capabilities of the vehicles you could build would increase over time the more parts you collected, and those parts were all licensed Lego pieces. Many of the puzzles you needed to solve boiled down to playing with physics. The idea was to get players thinking about how physics work in fun ways. We'll talk about those puzzles later when I share more details about the gameplay. First, let's rewind a bit and figure out how the Lego Kerbal game came to be. The project was kicked off sometime in 2022, more than 2 years after KSP2 should have had its release. Since their heavily marketed title kept getting delayed, the studio looked for alternatives to release something. A rocket-building game like Kerbal Space Program that enabled you to be very creative, and Lego, a toy system focused on creative building, seemed like a match made in heaven. With just 5 people, 2 engineers, an art lead, a designer, and an engineering lead, the team began to develop a prototype. First, they started out in Unity, but they switched to Unreal Engine after a couple of months. That happened for 2 reasons. First, they had hoped that Unreal would give them more support for round worlds. You see, game engines are usually designed to put everything in a flat environment. But if you need to handle a celestial body in space, there isn't really one up or one down. It's all stretched around this ball on which everything is placed. And yes, it involved spaceflight. They wanted to transition between surface and space in a continuous movement without loading screens or other trickery. Another reason for using Unreal Engine was that Lego claimed they would have a library with all official Lego parts for Unreal available soon. However, that never came to pass. The team built their own database of LEGO parts, but had to fight LEGO along the way because both parties had different ideas about the parts that should be available. While the developers wanted to tap into the nostalgia and give players parts from the rich history of LEGO's various space series, LEGO themselves wanted to have more modern parts available. The goal for them was to get people to buy their current sets on the market. This Kerbal game was just a marketing tool for them. But the developers had a trick up their sleeve. One of the team members was a LEGO superfan. He almost knew all parts number by heart, and so he managed to create some of the older nostalgia space sets with newer parts. After about half a year, at the beginning of 2023, the team still didn't have an official budget size communicated to them. So they pitched the fancy version, let's say the pizza with all possible toppings, to Publisher Private Division, which was an extension of parent company Take-Two. This fancy pizza was priced at $30 million, which was rejected. However, around that time, they had a bunch of developers from British studio Roll7 that they didn't have sufficient work for, so the decision was made to combine the Intercept Games team in Seattle with the Roll7 developers in the UK. In the end, the budget for the Kerbal Lego game was still around $25 million, but with this trick they circumvented lengthy hiring and onboarding processes. Or so the publisher's management thought. In essence, instead of being able to increase their own strength and hire to fill gaps in their already available skill set, the pizza team had to coordinate across 7 hours time difference with a team of developers that were hired for a different purpose and with in part different skill sets than the game would have actually required. Also, the Roll7 people started seeing the writing on the wall that their studio was heading towards closure, which didn't increase their motivation. Around that time, KSP2 creative director Nate Simpson was also added as creative director for the LEGO game, together with KSP2 art director Christina Ness. While part of the same studio, the pizza team so far hadn't had a lot of contact with the KSP2 team. Both were run as separate projects, and apart from these director roles, there was no overlap or swapping of development resources. After the disastrous reception KSP2 got from the fanbase, support from Take-Two began to wane, not just for the sequel to Kerbal Space Program, but for everything regarding Studio Intercept games. From what I was told, Take-Two already began looking for a way out of the financial mess they had gotten themselves into with the Kerbal franchise shortly after the early access release for KSP2 had gone live. This resulted in less and less support for the fledgling Kerbal Lego game. For instance, the team had to wait until September 2023 to get their own build server. Until then, they had to build everything locally, which is possible, just annoying. At least they could share the source code repository infrastructure with the KSP2 team, because no, they didn't get their own. In modern software development, you have things like test-driven development and continuous integration. Not so in the world of Take-Two, it seems. Makes you wonder what really causes all those delays to GTA 6. While the contacts at LEGO gave their thumbs up in the monthly controlling meetings where the team would present the results, Take-Two nevertheless cut the budget in half at the beginning of 2024. This meant also reducing the team to half its size, which resulted in letting go of the Roll7 developers. The remaining members soldiered on, but it was clear to them that Take-Two no longer had any interest in Intercept games, despite the Kerbal Lego game getting positive reactions in playtesting sessions. As I already told you in the beginning, in April 2024 it became clear that the studio was slated for the chopping block. From that on until their actual firing in June, no real work was done by anyone. The situation was described to me as people sitting at their desks and looking for new jobs during work hours for the final couple of weeks. And who can blame them? So, how close did they get to an actual release for the Kerbal Lego game? Based on my conversations with the people familiar with Project Pizza, it was potentially 8 to 12 months away from a release. The biggest problem they hadn't solved yet was how to travel between the different levels, all of which were separate planets or areas in space. If they had been able to release it, what was the goal? In previous videos, we have talked about how one of the main goals of Kerbal Space Program 2 was to make it in particular, and spaceflight in general, more accessible to the general public. Hence all the focus on tutorials and explainer videos. And it appeared to work, at least that was the feedback the team was receiving. I myself tried out the tutorials and found them reasonably well executed. Link to that video is in the description or up here somewhere. The Kerbal Lego game was aimed at even younger audiences and would have been sort of a gateway drug to spaceflight and building rockets. As I will show you in a little while, it was much less complex than KSP or KSP2, and it would not teach you orbital mechanics as those other games do. It was more science fiction than engineering, something to fire up and have fun with for a while instead of having to spend hours in the VAB tweaking every detail of your interplanetary cruiser and having to wait 20 minutes until it reaches orbit. Everything in Pizza was straightforward and led to quick gratification for players. With LEGO as a collaboration partner, the game would have had access to the toy manufacturer's vast marketing resources in addition to those of publisher Take-Two. Due to the potentially wide appeal, this game could have generated positive cash flow a lot faster than KSP2. Even if the pizza would have had to stay in the oven for another year, meaning it would have come out sometime this year, that would still mean it would have made it from proposal to finished game in roughly 3 years, almost half of what it took KSP2 to get to the unfinished early access build. The Kerbal Lego game could have been the financial motor to keep Intercept Games afloat while they finished KSP2 to a level that would have been acceptable for the player base. But in order to do that, it needed to be a fun game. Was it? You'll be the judge of that after I tell you how it played. I already told you that this game was centered around solving physics puzzles by building different vehicles for different purposes. There was no prescribed solution, it was more along the lines of get something from A to B, or find a way to knock over this tower, or cross this ravine. You could find ways to jump over it, or create a sort of bridge-laying vehicle to create a safe passage across the chasm. Of course, balancing the game meant that you were restricted in what parts you could use for certain situations, because crossing a gap is a lot easier when you have a rocket engine available to strap to your rover. In the beginning of each game, you could select from a couple of levels. Each was set on a different planet or moon. For this video, I want to focus on 2 missions, one centered around building different types of rovers, and one space mission. The first was called Scavenger Hunt. In it, your task was to help Benny, the LEGO astronaut, to get to a nearby moon. Benny also served as sort of guide for beginners. If you notice the Xbox controller button prompts, that was because this game was designed from the start to launch on consoles. Aside from PC, it was set to release on PlayStation and Xbox, but not the Switch. Nintendo's console was just not powerful enough. Before you even get to your first opportunity to build something, you can see your goal in the far distance, that small moon to the right of the sun. Speaking of the sun, planets would revolve around it, meaning there were dynamic shadows and day-night cycles. Not much later, you would find your first build spot. These would enable you to open the build menu and start putting together a vehicle, all made from official LEGO parts. The build spots would also serve as save points, so if you crashed your vehicle, and being a Kerbal game, that would happen a lot, you would revert to the last build spot you had visited. With your first rover, you would drive on, with Benny giving some commentary. See that ramp in the background? You would have to jump that to get to the next area. After finding more parts, you were able to upgrade your rover, for instance with a more powerful engine and better wheels. After a couple of more jumps, you would find some platforms you need to align so you could drive across them. Some you could just push in, but others you would need to pull. Luckily, at this point, the game would offer you new parts in the gadget category, which had some rotors, hinges, and pistons you could use to give your vehicle the capability to pull a platform. This is what I meant with no prescribed solution. In this scenario, you could solve the question of how can I pull the platform in multiple ways with either of the new gadgets. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in this case. how would your rover have pulled the platforms? After this obstacle, you would move on and get more parts until you eventually had enough to build a rocket to get to the moon. I think you get the idea. And before one of you starts typing furiously in the comments, I'll save you the time. Yes, the build mechanic of the Kerbal Lego game looks like it is taken straight from Trailmakers, one of the space game alternatives I highlighted a while back. Link to the videos in the description. And yes, the people I spoke to admitted that pizza was heavily influenced by the indie game. I wonder what the Trailmakers developers think about that. But Trailmakers is not the only indie game that this title would borrow from. Let's talk about the aforementioned space mission. It is called Space Oddity, and in it you need to feed a strange lighthouse creature. This green fellow in the back. For this, you need a rocket, so we have a lot more parts at our disposal now. By the way, in the background you can see one of the nostalgia sets I was talking about earlier. With the rocket built, you need to hunt down some food because you need the lighthouse to clear up the nebula surrounding this area of space. One fun little detail along the way was that even the asteroids in this game had a bit of a Lego shape. Regarding spaceflight, this was a far cry from the realism of KSP. Yes, you would keep your momentum after shutting down the engine, but you could arrest all movement with the press of a button if you added a so-called space brake to your vehicle. It's a similar mechanic as Outer Wilds uses to match velocity with the current target, and that was not the only thing Outer Wilds inspired the team to do. In order to get from one area to the other, there was an idea to have a compact solar system similar to the indie game, so you could have this sense of traveling between planets, but without the hassle of performing interplanetary transfer maneuvers. No interplanetary stuff in this mission though. You were supposed to find a donut and bring it back to that lighthouse creature. Again, you would have to modify your vehicle so that the donut would stay in place while you brought it back. In this case, a pole with hinges did the trick. Slide the pole through the donuts with the hinges closed, then press a button to open them and thus keep the donut secure. Once close to the lighthouse creature, close the hinges again and hit the brakes so that the donut would slide off and land inside the mouth. As a reward, you were treated to a cutscene where the creature would light up, the nebula would clear, and you were greeted by a happy face. That concludes our detailed look at the gameplay of the Kerbal Lego game. However, I have a couple of more things to say because I see a lot of parallels to how KSP2 was developed, since there were similar mistakes. First off, let me again iterate how mind-boggling the secrecy surrounding everything Kerbal was while that franchise was under the control of Take-Two. I even did a video on the ridiculous NDA they wanted me to sign to be sort of an early playtester for KSP2, which I had to refuse. The people hired for the Kerbal Lego game didn't really know what was expected from them. They knew it was a Kerbal game when they were interviewed, but that was all they had to go off on. At least they already got to know that it was a Kerbal game. In the beginning of KSP2 development, the studio was not allowed to tell prospective developers what they would be working on. Until I managed to dig up the details for this video, there was no word about the Kerbal Lego game anywhere except cryptic mentions of an adventure-style game in collaboration with a toy manufacturer. The second mistake was throwing people onto a project that were hired for a different purpose, with a different skill set and in a different time zone. During KSP2 development, a Chinese team was supposed to do a console port for the game. But since it was delayed so much, that team had nothing to do, so they were put on regular KSP2 development tasks, which in the end probably caused more problems than it solved. Take-Two, in their infinite wisdom, did the same with the Roll 7 developers. It just proves that they don't see developers or employees in general as specialized talent, or as individual humans, but just as numbers on a spreadsheet. Hey, we have some headcounts here we can shift. They all have developer next to their name. That will surely work out. Yeah, just like a guy working on a bicycle and a guy fixing an airplane both have mechanic next to their name. Then there's the lack of equipment. I told you in my KSP2 development history video how the team didn't get any test servers mere months before they were supposed to release the early access version. Not even a year later, the team of the other game at Intercept had to struggle getting a build server. Then there were the people controlling the progress. From what I was told, the team's counterparts at LEGO were all marketing and intellectual property people. Nobody there really knew what made a good video game. It feels to me like somebody at Take-Two has looked at the Agile Manifesto and decided to do the complete opposite of every principle, especially number 5. If you don't know, the Agile Manifesto is a set of principles for modern-day software development. Number 5 says, build projects around motivated individuals, give them the equipment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done. They gave them developers not hired for the desired purposes, so no motivated individuals. They didn't get the build server they needed, and no budget outline before they pitched, so neither equipment nor support. And I think I don't have to spend any more words on Take-Two and trust, do I? And before someone chimes in that this is something new or not how things are done, the Agile Manifesto is from 2001. It is almost a quarter century old. I personally have been in multiple companies that adhered to its principles with great success. Anyway, speaking of success, I personally believe this Kerbal Lego game could have had some because it would have been fun. Everyone I talked to for this video spoke highly of this game, while at the same time leveling criticism at the quality of KSP2. Early playtesting showed a lot of promise, and the demos circulating the studio apparently were a lot of fun. The collaboration between Kerbal Space Program and LEGO should have made for a great pairing. I mean, I myself oftentimes describe KSP to people who haven't heard of it yet as LEGO for rockets. From what I have seen, I would have probably enjoyed playing it. It appeared to be a lot smoother than the first iteration of KSP2, that's for sure, and having played Trailmakers and enjoying their build mechanic, but finding the worlds a bit empty and devoid of a narrative, Project Pizza could have filled in those gaps. And the LEGO space set nostalgia would also have hit me in the right spot. A while ago I was in Prague and visited the LEGO museum there, and I found the sets I myself had owned as a kid. This moon base, this rover/mobile base, this walker, this mobile rocket launcher, and this spaceship that could split into multiple separate vehicles. Ah yes, to be a kid again. But hey, I'd like to have your opinion. After what I have told you, do you think this game would have had a chance? Would you have bought it? Do you think you would have enjoyed it based on what I have told you? Let me know in the comments or hop on over on my Discord server, link is in the description. Also, let me know what you think about the video in general. This took a lot of time to research and get a hold of any visuals due to the secrecy surrounding the game. I had to tap many sources to put this video together. If you want to support my activities aside from subscribing, the best way to do that is if you sign up over on Patreon, where you can watch all my videos ad-free for a small monthly contribution. Top-tier members over there and here on YouTube get to see my videos a couple of days in advance before they become available for the general public. Also, on the higher tiers, your name will show up here, together with all of these wonderful people. Thank you so much for your support. The question remains whether or not LEGO or the new owners of the Kerbal franchise will ever finish Project Pizza. Since there was already a lot in a playable state, maybe the new investment firm owning the KSP franchise will finance one more year of development to get this out of the door. Compared to KSP2, this game actually has a chance to get finished one day, since both the scope and the technological challenges are a lot smaller. Add to that a highly popular property with LEGO and you might have a winner on your hands, something that investment firms really like to have. But then again, LEGO might put a stop to that. It appears that they are disappointed with the experience of outsourcing game development. They have announced that they want to develop their games in-house going forward, and without the blessing of the franchise owner, this game will go nowhere. So in the end, it might come down to this. Instead of Pizza saving KSP2, KSP2 dragged Pizza down with it.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel for more and follow me on my social thingies. The links are in the description. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.